You shouldn't film an ad in front of a trailer and say, I live in here.
You should also let your city burn down while you're in Africa. Jessica, she was in Africa when the city burned down. There was no water in the reservoir. And you're mad about a campaign ad?
And do you want to relitigate how many hydrants were full of this or whose fault it actually was? I have not defended Mayor Bass on what happened.
You just sounded like you did. You just said, you know what, it's a Democrat town. By the way, it's not a Republican. He's running as an independent, and he just smoked both women at the debate so badly they surrendered. All right? You can't look at this woman who wants to take millions of taxpayer dollars and give it to a celebrity dentist's nonprofit in Brentwood so he could give meth addicts free veneers. How can you think that's a good idea? What are the meth heads going to like Uber from the homeless encampment to some ritzy little place to sit next to some supermodel?
Who's also from reality television.
This doesn't even make any sense, Jessica.
How many people who are unhoused that you meet have no teeth at all? They don't have teeth. Why? Because meth rots your teeth. You can't succeed without teeth. So there needs to be comprehensive health care provided to people.
Happy National Barbecue Day, everyone. The one sacred American holiday where we gather as one nation and say, you know what this meat needs? More smoke. But apparently, according to this article, LA mayoral hopeful Nithia Raman wants to ban backyard barbecues on high fire danger days. Now look, I get it. California catches fire if someone sneezes too aggressively. But banning barbecues in America? That's like banning yelling at the TV during football season. It's not a hobby, it's a constitutional emotion. Do you think dads are going to accept this quietly? Absolutely not. Every suburban father with cargo shorts and a spatula is about to become a backyard freedom fighter. Sir, step away from your brisket. You will take my ribs from my smoke-infused hands.
A reality TV star did a French Bel Air parody campaign ad in front of the rubble where his house used to be. It went viral overnight, and now he's a legitimate contender in the LA mayoral race. And the reason that's hitting so hard isn't the nostalgia. It's that this guy is making more sense than the actual mayor of the city. Karen Bass was at a government-funded conference in Africa when the Palisades fire broke out. The reservoirs were empty, the hydrants ran dry, people lost everything. That's the backdrop here. And before anyone tries to make this a left versus right argument, stop. Because this is about a city that has been run into the ground by the people currently asking for 4 more years to finish the job. So here's what Pratt actually did. And I want you guys to check it out. He took the French Bel Air theme, you know, with Will Smith, rewrote the lyrics around losing his home, and filmed the whole thing standing in front of the lot where his home used to be. And this wasn't some calculated political stunt cooked up by a consulting firm. This was a guy who genuinely lost his home under this mayor's watch, has a wife and kids, and decided that instead of sitting quietly and waiting on an insurance check that may never come, he was going to turn the whole situation into a political statement. And it landed because it was real. No focus groups, no carefully worded talking points designed to defend nobody. Just a dad who lost everything, telling you exactly who he thinks is responsible for it. And he did it with enough humor that people actually stopped scrolling long enough to hear him. And that combination is something LA voters haven't seen in a long time. So I want you guys to check it out.
Now this is a story all about how my life got flipped, turned upside down, and I had to take a minute to run for mayor. I'll tell you how I became the prince of a town called Bel Air. Los Angeles, Palisades, in my backyard is where I spent most of my days. Feeding hummingbirds, relaxing all cool, avoiding all the bums outside of the school. When a couple politicians who were up to no good started making trouble in my neighborhood, I got in one little fire, my mom got scared and said, "You're moving in with Harvey Levin in Bel Air." About 7 or 8, and I yelled to the rubble, "Yo ho, smell you later." I moved to my kingdom, I was finally there to sit on my throne as the Prince of Bel Air.
Now that was a classic beat. Now the situation in itself is unfortunate, horrible, and horrific in itself. So I was just rocking to the beat, man, because that's a classic theme song by the show. If you know, you know, from Will Smith as the, Fresh Prince of Bel-Air show. But TMZ ran a piece trying to say he's a fraud because he's been staying at a hotel in Bel Air instead of living full time in the trailer he used as a campaign backdrop. And I need you to think about how backwards that framing actually is, because his house burned down. He has a family. He's staying somewhere while he figures out what comes next, the same way any normal person would. And the story TMZ wanted to tell was, quote unquote, Spencer Pratt is faking it, when the actual story is that his home is gone and the city's leadership hasn't done nearly enough for the thousands of people sitting in the exact same situation. But nobody wanted to talk about that part. They wanted the gotcha, and they didn't get one. The other thing is his opponents keep doing is calling him MAGA. And before I go any further, I want you guys to check out this clip.
No previous experience in government should not be a legitimate political candidate.
Meanwhile, LA Mayor Karen Bass trying to stay in the fight with her latest proposal to fight criminals with solar panels.
We have a terrible problem in LA with copper wire theft, which means our street lights go out all the time. Well, about a month ago, I've rolled out a plan to install 60,000 solar lights, moving away from copper. I think that he is tapping into a general sense of anger that people have, not just in Los Angeles, but in many other places around our country.
All right, Kennedy, you've been following this very closely. A big weekend in the race.
Why are people angry in Los Angeles? That's so weird. Actually, Karen Bass, I have been all across the country, especially recently. I've lived in Los Angeles the better part of my adult life, and I will tell you, people are angrier there than they are anywhere else in the country. And they are no angrier than in Pacific Palisades, where, like Spencer Pratt, they have been displaced. And under your mayorship, insurance companies, they don't have to pay for people to rebuild their homes. And they know the longer they delay, the more likely people are to take settlements that are pennies on the dollar, that are a pittance for anything that would actually allow them to rebuild their homes and their lives.
And there you have it. But a lot of people, that his opponents, are calling him MAGA, Spencer Pratt. And that label isn't sticking because it isn't accurate. Pratt is running as an independent. He's not on a Republican ticket, and throwing that label at him every time his name comes up is a deflection strategy, not a critique. His opponent, Nithia Raman, called him a conspiracy theorist with no plans and no experience in government. And she said it like those were disqualifying facts. But think about what she's actually arguing. She's saying that his experience inside the same system that produced the Palisades fire, the homelessness crisis, the failed audits, and the budget overruns is a credential worth defending. And in a city that's functioning, that argument works. But in the city LA is right now, it's the weakest possible case she could make, and voters are seeing straight through it. And what sealed it was a debate, plain language, direct answers, no theater, just a guy being straightforward about what he saw and what he thought needed to change. And on paper, that's a low bar. But in the context of this race, it stood out immediately because nobody else on that stage was operating anywhere near that register. So that's who Pratt is and why people are responding to him. Let's get into what he's actually running against, because the record here is something else entirely. So I want to get into Karen Bass. Check this out.
And today we are wrapping up our week-long conversations with the top candidates running for Los Angeles mayor. We're doing it with the incumbent and the front-runner in the race, Mayor Karen Bass. She is running for a second term, and she is talking about what she has accomplished while in office and what she wants to do with another 4 years. So let's go over to our political reporter, Josh Haskell, with another conversation. Josh.
Philip, thank you so much. We have incumbent Mayor of Los Angeles, Karen Bass, here. She is running for re-election. Thank you so much for joining us. Mayor, let's get right into it.
Sure.
When I interviewed you at the one-year anniversary of the Palisades fire, you told me that you were a little surprised that so much of the anger about the fire is still directed solely at you. And it seems like that anger has now encompassed other problems facing the city: homelessness, Hollywood production, crime, all directed at you. How do you convince such an angry electorate that you deserve 4 more years?
Well, first of all, it's super important that I explain about the accomplishments that have been done. The fact that homelessness is down 17.5%, 2 years in a row. It's the first time we've seen a decline in street homelessness. Around the country, homelessness went up 18%. Crime is down. 60-year low in terms of our homicide rate. We go through spikes here and there, and when we do, we respond aggressively. But also the alternatives so that you don't always have to have a police officer. Increasing the hiring of police. Building 42,000 units of affordable housing, because we know that the #1 issue in our city was 4 years ago and it is today, is affordability. The part that we can control in the city is the cost of housing. And all of that has taken place under my watch. I want to make sure that we can move forward and complete what we started and prepare our city for a very successful games, which I know we will have.
On homelessness, I know that street homelessness is down, but roughly 40% of those who have gone through Inside Safe have ended up back on the street. What is being done to address that?
Well, first of all, the #1 thing that has been lacking is the services. So once we get people off the street, making sure that we address why they fell on the street to begin with. Josh, 60% of the people at Inside Safe have remained housed. I think it's really important to build on that success. But what LA needs to do in the next 4 years that I plan to accomplish is building out a more cost-effective system to deal with people when they get off the street and not put them into permanent housing immediately. You can't go from a tent into an apartment and expect to function on your own.
Also on homelessness, at the pantry earlier this week, you were talking about comprehensive health care for the unhoused. And you talked about how many of the unhoused, because of their meth use, lose their teeth.
That's right.
Who would pay for the dental care for the unhoused?
When I say comprehensive health care, it's actually what people can get from Medi-Cal. The problem is that the linkage isn't made with the people and the services.
So
and
that would be
that system,
taxpayers?
well, we already pay for it. It's already paid for. It's the linkage that hasn't happened.
The reaction to that, though, was, why isn't the mayor doing more to address the meth use in the first place? What are you doing to address the drug use so we don't have to pay for dental care?
And let me just 100%. Let me just tell you that when I came in, we started, even though it is not the city's role to provide health care, it is the county. That was not enough for me. I said we have to provide it ourselves. So we took lawsuit money from tobacco and we established contracts with drug-related organizations, substance abuse organizations. And so some of those people we can refer to a drug treatment program. The issue with dental is that you want people to be productive. You want them to have a job. You want them to no longer need public assistance. So while someone is in interim housing waiting for permanent housing, let's us help them get their act together so they will be successful and down the line will not need public assistance at all.
Is the current size and hiring rate of the LAPD sustainable?
No, well, the current size, no. We need to have more police officers because for Los Angeles, we have a relatively small department. And you know what? You're going to pay one way or another. You're going to pay an overtime cost, and you're certainly going to pay in a compromise of quality of life of individuals who...
All right, family. So Karen Bass, right? She was in Africa when the Palisades fire broke out. And everything about her record flows from that single moment. The moment the city needed its mayor and the mayor wasn't there, and no amount of press conferences or damage tours after the fact changes what happened on the ground while she was gone, because the people who lost their homes weren't watching the statement get read at a podium. They were standing in ash trying to figure out what was left. And the documented reality is that the reservoirs were empty, the hydrants ran dry, and the emergency infrastructure that was supposed to protect those neighborhoods failed completely in real time while the mayor was at a government-funded conference overseas. Now, Bass has spent months since then trying to run on her record, as you guys seen in this clip. And the centerpiece of that record is homelessness being down by 17.5% 2 years in a row. And the first question any honest person has to ask when she cites that number is, how do we actually know that? Because the city controller tried to audit the Inside Safe program and Bass blocked it. She argued the controller didn't have the authority to review it, which means the one person whose entire job is to independently verify how public money gets spent tried to do exactly that job, and the mayor said no. So every number she puts in front of voters about Inside Safe comes from a program that has never been independently verified. And she's asking people to trust a grade she wrote for herself on a test nobody else was allowed to grade. And when you look at what Inside Safe actually produced with the money it burnt through, the picture falls apart fast. The program spent over $130 million in a single year against an 80. So $130 million in a single year against an $80 million budget. And it housed roughly 1,000 people out of more than 40,000 unhoused in Los Angeles. So we're talking about a massive structural deficit producing a result that barely scratches the surface of the actual problem. Then Bass goes on record and says 60% of people who went through Inside Safe remain housed. And she says it like that's a foundation worth building on. But what she won't say over what time period? 3 months, 6 months, because the longer the window, the lower that number gets. And there's already documentation showing the long-term success rate is a lot lower than what she's advertising, which means even the number she's defending is being presented in the most favorable possible framing with no independent verification behind it. Because look, the individuals that remain housed that she's saying is like it's a foundation worth building on, over what period of time? Because if you're going to measure something, you have to, first of all, understand what goal is being reached, and over time, how is the trajectory of that goal being reached? But if there's no numbers, and let alone with the trajectory of the measurement of reaching that goal, then is it really a goal that's being measured? No. And even if you take the 60% at face value, that still means 4 out of every 10 people the program was supposed to help went straight back to the street at a cost that ran tens of millions over budget to produce that outcome. This pattern didn't start with Bass either. Gavin Newsom already spent $20 billion at the state level to address homelessness, and homelessness went up. So what she's operating inside of is bigger than just her administration, but she is absolutely continuing it and defending it while fire victims in Pacific Palisades are still waiting on insurance payouts, with companies dragging out those claims because the longer they delay, the more likely people are going to take whatever settlement is on the table just to get through the month. You guys heard that in the clip, right, with Jesse Waters on. So people accepting far less than what they need to actually rebuild. And the mayor's signature infrastructure response to all of that has been a plan to install 60,000 solar-powered streetlights. And then the free dental care plan proposal and the consequences that I want to get to. So she just touted, as you guys just heard in this ABC News 7 News interview. So if Bass's record is the problem, her opponent on the left isn't bringing anything different to the table. She's just repacking the same fundamental approach with slightly different language. And the clearest example of that is Nithia Raman. And for those who don't know who she is, this is Nithia Raman, proposing to use taxpayer money to fund a celebrity dentist nonprofit. Karen Bass is no different from her. We didn't get to her yet, but we'll get to her in this last clip. But staying on Karen Bass, and I just wanted to say that they're both alike. They're both similar. Karen Bass just packages hers a little bit differently. But Raman here on this screen, proposing to use taxpayer money to fund a celebrity dentist nonprofit out in Brentwood to provide free dental care, including veneers. And when you look at that, to unhoused meth users, and when that got attention and people started asking real questions about it, Bass didn't distance herself from it. She showed up at a campaign event and echoed it. So they're both echoing the same thing. Karen Bass and her on the screen, Raman. So framing the whole thing as comprehensive health care that you heard Karen Bass say for the unhoused, and her explanation was that the dental care is already covered under Medi-Cal, so it's already just a linkage problem. The services exist, people just aren't being connected to them. And she said that like the framing made the whole thing less controversial, but it didn't, because the question nobody pushed hard enough in that moment is the obvious one. Are you actually getting people off meth, or are you just managing the physical damage while the behavior keeps going? And Bass did address the drug treatment side of it. And she talked about using tobacco lawsuit settlement money to fund contracts with substance abuse organizations so people could be referred into treatment programs. And on the surface, that sounds reasonable, but referrals into treatment and people actually completing treatment and staying clean are two completely different things. And she never answered a direct question about how successful the city has actually been at getting people off meth. She pivoted straight into the dental argument, the logic being that teeth help people get jobs, jobs reduce dependence on public assistance, fixing the teeth is part of fixing the person. And there's a version of that reasoning that makes a sense in a vacuum. The problem is, it's built entirely on the assumption that the drug use is already being addressed, and there's nothing in her record that shows it is. Now, here's the plain English version of why this bothers people so much. And it's not about being cruel to anyone who's struggling. So let's get that out of the way right now. Consequences exist for a reason, and that's not a political opinion. That's just how human behavior works. When a decision produces a difficult or painful outcome, that outcome creates pressure, and that pressure is part of what pushes someone toward a different choice. So when you remove that pressure entirely by replacing the natural result of destructive behavior with a government-funded fix, you are not solving the problem. You are making the problem more sustainable. You are reducing the friction that might have pushed someone in a different direction, and you're doing it with public money while calling it compassion. And that's the part that should bother people regardless of where they sit politically, because this isn't a left versus right point. It's basic logic. A basic logic point. A program that costs hundreds of millions of dollars and produces no lasting behavioral change is not a success story. It's a cycle that keeps renewing itself at the taxpayer's expense, and nobody in city leadership wants to say that out loud. Have you ever tried to, I don't know if you guys have, but I'm speaking from an anecdotal experience. Have you ever tried to convince someone to get off of alcohol, to change their lives, to work out, to basically replace their bad habits with good habits? People gonna do what they want to do when they want to do it, and you can't control nobody but yourself. So if someone doesn't want to get clean from substance abuse, even though you pay for their veneers or you pay for them to get their teeth because they lost it due to substance abuse from something they're battling with, but also the choice to continue to use, you ever try to I'm gonna give you another example to tie it together. You ever try to give a homeless person some food and they just wanted the cash instead of the food, but they claim they're hungry because they want the cash for the usage to continue to feed the addiction, which is the destructive behavior. I try to even take a homeless individual to go to McDonald's, or I say I would come back and get them the food. And they said, no, just give me the cash. I don't want the food. But you told me you wanted the food. And then they can, some, not all, can get cocky or be entitled. It's like, oh no, well, I don't want the food. I don't want your food. I just want the money. Oh, well, don't give me anything. And you're like, hold on, I'm just trying to help you. And you say you were hungry. How can I help you in regards? I can go get what you need, but I'm not just going to give you the cash. But you tell me what you need and I just get it for you. But no, they want the cash. So how can you help someone that don't want to be helped? And even if I gave them the food, they're not going to want the food because they wanted the cash to get the substance. So if you fix their teeth, does that mean they're going to stop using the substance? Because you can't help somebody that won't want to be helped. You could drag a horse to water, but don't make it drink it. So at one point, people are looking at this and saying, is this another service that's being streamlined using American taxpayer money to fix meth heads' teeth? And not saying that they haven't gone through something or something that may have led them to that substance abuse, but how far is to a certain extent where we say, okay, we tried to help them as much as possible on American taxpayer dime. Can we find another approach besides paying for all their teeth that they choose to lose, continue to use this substance? Is there a different way? Can we put them in a place where they actually have a shelter, like a mental health institution for individuals who may have mental health problems, where they can still live, eat, sleep, and all of that, and live there? Right? I'm just speaking in regards of critics and how the overall sentiment of individuals, how they feel and why they feel is frustrating, because Karen Bass just resulted into saying, hey, we need to pay for their teeth to help them get a job. But you can't force nobody to work that don't want to work. You got lazy people in the world too. Take the substance abuse away. So what are we talking about? But you're still streamlining American taxpayers' money. So a program that costs millions of dollars, hundreds of millions of dollars, and produces no lasting behavioral change. Is not a success story. It's a cycle that keeps renewing itself at the taxpayer's expense. And nobody in the city leadership wants to say that out loud. I'm going to say it again. And that cycle is exactly what the broader pattern in LA looks like. Because every time one of these programs falls short or falls short, the answer is never the question whether the underlying approach is the problem. The answer is always that it didn't go far enough. It was underfunded. The linkage wasn't right. They need more time and more resources to do the exact same thing they already been doing. And that's the psychology of doubling down, dressed up as policy analysis. And Raman here on the screen is doing it with her entire candidacy. She looked directly at everything broken in LA, acknowledged it, and then proposed a version of the same framework that produced it and just repackaged cleaner language. That's not a solution. That's a rebrand. All right. So now let's get into this because I want you guys to hear what Raman had to say. We heard about Karen Bass in regards of fixing, individuals who are battling with substance abuse, to be more specific, meth, and getting them teeth through taking a tobacco lawsuit money and streamlining it into Medicaid or some type of health care through SoCal in California to help them get brand new teeth. So now let's check out what Nithia Raman had to say in regards to what she's proposing and what she's saying, because they both basically saying a similar thing. They both support the idea of paying for substance abuse users' veneers or teeth.
Than a dozen candidates are challenging Mayor Karen Bass in next month's primary. While Bass is sitting with a lead in most polls, two candidates, Spencer Pratt and Nithia Raman, have gained ground in recent months. Earlier, I spoke with Raman about her race and her candidacy. Here's more of our conversation. You just got into the race earlier this year, and some polls show you trailing incumbent Mayor Karen Bass as well as reality star Spencer Pratt. What are you doing between now and the June primary to close the gap?
LA has a top two primary system, and incumbents usually get into the runoff, which is what the polling is showing us here. What I'm trying to do is tell people about the state of the race. Spencer Pratt and I are neck and neck right now, and one of us will be in the runoff and will be on the ballot in November. And that race for the second spot comes down to me, who has a progressive vision for an affordable Los Angeles, or a MAGA Republican who's a conspiracy theorist who is...
You see, guys, I mentioned that earlier. She is claiming that Spencer Pratt is MAGA. And like I told you, he's not on a Republican ticket. He's an independent. He's just a man that's from LA, and he feels as though he watched his city go to shambles. So he felt like it was no choice for him but to run to save California, because the way that is being governed under a certain political party, aka Democrat, isn't going well. He doesn't want to see another 4 years of it being destroyed because he loved the city so much and it could be beautiful. So he ran as an independent to make change. But he's not a MAGA individual. He's an independent. That's what he is.
Never held public office and has never shared any plans for how he's actually going to implement the change that he talks about. To me, that's the choice that's facing Los Angeles on June 2nd, and every vote is going to matter. That's the message that we're getting out to voters right now, and that is the message that is taking hold among many of the people that we're talking to.
Mayor Bass recently described Spencer Pratt's campaign as, quote, tapping into a general sense of anger that people have. Do you agree with that assessment?
I believe that there is a real sense of frustration in Los Angeles around the state of the city. That's what propelled me to get into the race. And I feel like if you don't address that frustration with real actions, if you don't demonstrate real change on the ground in the things that are driving that frustration, the incredibly high cost of living here in this city, the homelessness crisis, which continues roiling our streets every single day, if you don't demonstrate progress, people will turn to people like Spencer Pratt, who are giving voice to that frustration, but who are not promising anything like real solutions. Anyone who tells you that homelessness can be fixed with a tweet is simply not being honest with you. And I want voters to be able to channel their frustrations into real change that I've demonstrated in my district.
You were once a key ally of the mayor, though. You even backed her reelection. So what changed for you? And do you believe your candidacy could split the vote and force a runoff?
You know, the mayor's polling was very low even before I got into the race. And there was a very, very high likelihood of a runoff no matter what. And there were a number of candidates who had challenged our incumbent mayor. What I'm trying to offer is a choice between a very broken status quo that I think has failed a lot of Angelenos. People look into our city and they see a city that is harder to live in than it was before Mayor Bass took office. They see a city which is not meeting the moment. It's not meeting the issues that they're facing with urgency or accountability or results. And what I'm trying to show with my candidacy is that there is an alternative between our broken status quo and a MAGA Republican who is making unjustified promises to Angelenos, that we can have a path forward that promises a real solution to the very real challenges that Angelenos are facing. And that's really the message that I'm sharing.
All right, here's what makes this race genuinely worth paying attention to, because every single candidate standing on that stage agrees that Los Angeles has serious problems: homelessness, crime, cost of living, fire recovery, all of it. But the two candidates running from the left are the same people who have been inside the machine. And what I mean by inside of the machine, Nithia Raman is currently a member of the Los Angeles City Council. She's representing District 4 in Los Angeles. She's held that position since 2020. So she's acting like she's not even in a position where she can speak as a council member to the mayor, as if she's just this new candidate or this candidate who has just seen these issues. But you're echoing in support of the mayor, but you're the same individual who could have been sitting down with her and making improvements and also vocalizing the truth, instead of making this a tit for tat, going against the very issues that you acknowledge to say that Spencer Pratt is saying. So if you agree that Spencer Pratt said there's real issues and you understand the frustrations besides your district, how vocal or how tied into have you been with Karen Bass? Because if anything, you're echoing the same things that a lot of people are frustrated with currently, because she's the current mayor that obviously is the incumbent that may be replaced. So when you look at that, the two candidates inside the machine, while every one of those problems got worse, and that's not a talking point, that's just a timeline. Bass has been a mayor and Ramen has been on the city council. So these aren't outsiders looking at a broken system from a distance. They're inside it. They have real power inside it. And the city got harder to live on their watch. So Raman tries to sell herself as a change candidate. The pitch falls apart immediately, because you can't run as change when you were sitting at the table where the decisions got made, and you don't get to point at the damage and pretend you weren't in it wrong. And yet that's exactly the argument she's making, that the difference between her and Bass is vision. Not the fundamental governing philosophy they both share, not the approach to public spending that produced Inside Safe and the Newsom numbers and a dental care proposal. Just vision, just execution, just the idea that the right people haven't been given enough runway to do the same thing better. And that's a hard sell when the direction hasn't changed in years and the results keep moving the wrong way. The reflex that kicks in every time something doesn't work is the real tell here, because the pattern runs deeper than any one candidate or any one policy. When a program fails, the instinct isn't to ask whether the underlying thinking is flawed. It's to argue the program wasn't resourced enough, wasn't applied broadly enough, wasn't given enough time. And that's not honest policy analysis. That's just an ideological commitment dressed up to look like one. And Raman looked directly at a city that her own council helped shape, and then offer voters a slightly cleaner version of the framework that shaped it, and called that an alternative. The more uncomfortable question sitting underneath all of this is about voters themselves, because the frustration in Los Angeles is real and it isn't new. People have been angry about this city for years, but that anger and actual voting behavior haven't been lining up. And the gap between them is what makes this race generally hard to read. When the consequences of bad governance stay abstract, rising costs, deteriorating conditions, a general sense that the things are sliding, it's easier to stay inside a familiar political identity, even when that identity keeps producing the same outcomes. What changes the math is when the consequences start being abstract and start being personal. and losing your house in a fire that the city wasn't prepared for, watching your neighborhood burn while the infrastructure failed in real time, finding out the mayor was at a conference overseas, that's the kind of thing that cuts through. Whether it cuts through enough to actually shift voting behavior in a city like LA is a question nobody can answer yet. Pratt's appeal was never really about him as an individual anyway. It's about what he represents at this specific moment. And the idea that plain language and basic accountability carry more weight right now than credentials built inside a system that keeps failing the people it was supposed to serve. Because she's saying that Pratt never ran a public office ever, never ran in as a public official or in the office, and never ran or governed anything. But he's a successful businessman. I think running a city and running your own business go hand in hand. With checks and balances still, right? Or I don't know. Let me know in the comments. So, a city without accountability eventually stops working for the people living in it, and Los Angeles is what that looks like in real time. When a Fresh Prince parody is the most grounded thing said in a mayoral race, the bar hasn't dropped. It's gone. Drop a comment. Do you think Pratt actually wins this, or does LA vote the same way it always has? Subscribe for more breakdowns like this. Now, I know a lot of people, I've seen critics in the comments of, these videos with Karen Bass and things like that, basically saying that it will be hard for Pratt to win because of all the cheating. The president have came out and recently have said that either today or yesterday that he doesn't really know Pratt personally, but he hears that he support Trump, and also that, it's hard to win in California, as the president said, quote unquote, because of a lot of cheating. But let me know what you guys think. Subscribe for more breakdowns like this. I'll catch you in the next one. Let me know your guys' thoughts in the comments. I will be responding to some of you guys. And get this video a big thumbs up. Catch you in the next one. Peace.